The life lessons from Joshua: unity and victory in faith. Throughout the history of Israel, many leaders left an indelible mark, but few are as inspiring as Joshua. His story is more than just a tale of battles and triumphs. It's a testament to unwavering faith, steadfast unity, and leadership rooted in purpose. From being Moses' devoted assistant to becoming the commander of Israel's armies, Joshua's life embodies the strength of faith and the power of unity in overcoming life's challenges. Joshua's leadership emerged during one of the most turbulent times in Israel's history. He guided a divided and weary people toward their destiny, the Promised Land, with enemies at every corner and internal doubts threatening to crumble their resolve. Joshua's victories were not solely dependent on military strategies. Instead, his reliance on divine guidance and his ability to foster unity among the people became his most potent tools. This story explores Joshua's defining moments, from his remarkable victories to his profound lessons on faith and unity. Unity is not merely about bringing people together. It is the force that transforms individuals into an unbreakable collective. And faith, as demonstrated by Joshua, is a source of strength that enables one to persevere through the impossible. Part 1. Joshua and the Call of God. In a time of great uncertainty, when the people of Israel wandered aimlessly through the desert, unsure of where to go or what their future held, God called upon Joshua, an ordinary man, like any other, to lead his people into the Promised Land. No one could have foreseen that Joshua, once a humble disciple, would rise to become a great leader, replacing Moses and guiding Israel through the most challenging trials to ultimately conquer the land of Canaan. But from the moment God called, both Joshua and the people of Israel understood that this was a divine mission of monumental importance, one that would test their faith, their courage, and their perseverance. Joshua was not a stranger to the people of Israel. He had long been Moses' loyal servant, accompanying him through the arduous journey in the wilderness. He had witnessed God's miracles firsthand, from the parting of the Red Sea to the mighty plagues that struck Egypt. Joshua had been one of the few who saw the majesty of God in the battle against Pharaoh and had stood by Moses' side during the struggle with the Amalekites. He was not merely a warrior. He was a man of deep faith, completely devoted to the Lord. Thus, when Moses passed away, God chose Joshua to continue the great work that Moses had started, not merely to carry on what had been done, but to lead Israel to fulfill a greater purpose: the conquest of the Promised Land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The loss of Moses was a heavy blow to the people of Israel. He had been their leader, their protector, and their guide. Now, with his passing, the Israelites were left in a state of confusion, wondering who could take up the mantle of leadership. They faced immense challenges ahead, from powerful enemies to the daunting task of claiming the land God had promised them. Canaan was a fertile land, but it was also a land full of giants, fortified cities, and countless obstacles. In the face of these daunting challenges, God called Joshua, not to replace Moses, but to finish the mission that had begun with him. The task at hand was nothing less than to bring Israel into the land that God had sworn to give to their ancestors. In that moment, Joshua did not step forward as a proud conqueror, but as a humble servant who had been entrusted with a responsibility greater than himself. He understood the weight of the task ahead. This was not merely a military campaign. It was a spiritual mission that would require absolute trust in God. Israel's strength would not lie in their armies alone, but in their unwavering belief in the promises of God. Joshua's role was not just to lead them in battle, but to keep their faith alive, to remind them of God's covenant, and to unite them as a people who believed in a vision greater than themselves. One quiet day, as Joshua stood alone, perhaps contemplating the enormity of the task ahead, the voice of God broke through. God spoke to Joshua clearly and powerfully. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for I will be with you wherever you go." These were not mere words of encouragement. They were a divine promise. The Lord assured Joshua that he would never face the battle alone. God's presence would go before him, guiding his steps, protecting his people, and ensuring that they would not be abandoned. In that moment, Joshua felt a deep sense of peace and confidence. The fears and doubts that had once gripped his heart began to fade. He understood that this was not about his strength or his ability to lead. It was about God's strength working through him. The God who had led the Israelites out of Egypt, who had parted the Red Sea, who had fed them in the wilderness, was the same God who would now lead them into the Promised Land. Joshua's role was to trust in God's plan, to be obedient to his call, and to inspire the people of Israel to do the same. This divine call was not just for Joshua, it was a call to the entire nation. Through Joshua, God was reminding the Israelites that their success would not come from their own power, but from their obedience to God's will. Joshua was not merely a military leader. He was the spiritual guide for the nation, the one who would keep their faith anchored in the truth that God would never forsake them. As long as they remained faithful, they would triumph. In the quiet of that moment, Joshua's life was transformed. The weight of his new responsibility was still heavy, but now he had the assurance of God's presence. He was no longer simply a man leading an army. He was a man chosen by God to fulfill a divine purpose. From that point on, Joshua's every action would be infused with the strength of God's promises. The victories to come would not be based on military strategy alone, but on the power of faith and trust in God's guidance. Joshua's call was not just a call to leadership, it was a call to faith. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Israel, a chapter that would be defined not by the strength of their armies, but by their unwavering belief in the God who had promised them a future. For Joshua, this was the beginning of a journey that would require not just his leadership, but his trust in God's faithfulness. And so, as Joshua stood at the threshold of a new era, he understood that the battles ahead would not be fought with swords alone. The true battle would be fought in their hearts, in their willingness to trust in God's plan, no matter how impossible it seemed. With God by his side, Joshua knew that victory was not only possible, but certain. And with that certainty, he would go forward, leading Israel into the Promised Land, one step at a time, knowing that God's faithfulness would be their strength. The military battle and the first victory, conquering Jericho. The story of Joshua begins with a monumental challenge that no one could have imagined: the conquest of the city of Jericho. Jericho, a fortified city with towering walls and well protected by a formidable army, was the first target on Israel's journey to claim the Promised Land. But Jericho was not just a city with strong walls and a powerful military. It symbolized the great obstacles and challenges that Israel had to overcome to enter the land God had promised them. The walls of Jericho were a physical manifestation of the barriers that stood between them and their destiny. For Israel's military forces, conventional tactics would never suffice. Jericho's walls were too thick, its defenses too impenetrable, and the Israeli army, despite its strength, had no way of breaking through those walls. But Joshua, with unwavering faith in God, chose a different path. He received a divine strategy from God, a plan so strange, so unconventional, that it defied all military logic. Instead of relying on typical weapons or siege tactics, Joshua was instructed to march around the city of Jericho with his army for 6 days in complete silence. Then, on the 7th day, they were to blow their trumpets and shout loudly. At first glance, this plan appeared to be utterly irrational. How could marching in silence and making noise with trumpets bring down a fortified city? But Joshua, deeply trusting in God's command, followed every step of the plan. For 6 days, the army marched around Jericho without speaking a word, silently obeying their leader's instructions. On the 7th day, as the army gathered in front of the city, the sound of the trumpets filled the air, followed by a loud cry from the people of Israel. And then, astonishingly, the walls of Jericho collapsed. No battle, no bloodshed, no conventional warfare, just an overwhelming demonstration of faith. The city fell not because of the power of Israel's army, but because of the power of faith and obedience to God's word. This victory was a clear indication that with unwavering faith, even the most formidable challenges could be overcome. Jericho, the city that seemed so impossible to defeat, had fallen because Israel chose to trust God's plan. This triumph was not only a military victory, but also a spiritual one. It taught the Israelites that victory did not come from their own strength, but from trusting in God's guidance. The defeat of Jericho was the first step in a series of victories that would eventually lead to the conquest of the Promised Land, showing that when God's will is followed with faith and perseverance, even the impossible becomes possible. The career of unity and challenges within the army. Following the triumph over Jericho, Joshua continued to lead Israel in further military campaigns. However, the road ahead was not free of difficulties. Joshua faced not only external challenges from enemy forces, but also internal struggles within his own army. These internal trials, though less discussed, were just as significant as the external battles Israel had to fight. One of the major challenges Joshua faced was maintaining unity among his troops, particularly when faced with adversity, failure, and internal conflicts. Not every member of the army shared the same level of faith as Joshua, and the persistence of internal strife and doubts about the possibility of victory could weaken the resolve of the army. As Israel continued its campaigns, Joshua realized that the key to winning not only battles but the war itself was maintaining unity within the army. This was no simple task. Warfare brings out the best and the worst in people, and tensions among the ranks can quickly lead to disarray. Joshua understood that Israel's greatest strength came not from their weapons or tactics, but from their unity and shared belief in their mission. To win the battles ahead, it was essential to remind the soldiers of their higher calling, to keep them focused on the greater purpose of conquering the Promised Land. Joshua's leadership required more than military strategy. It required keeping the army united and focused on their shared vision of fulfilling God's promise. The next significant test of this unity came after Israel's initial success in Jericho. The Israelites suffered a shocking defeat at the city of Ai, a setback that rattled their confidence and tested their faith. After their great victory at Jericho, the failure at Ai was devastating. How could this happen? Joshua, deeply distressed by the loss, turned to God for answers. Through divine revelation, he learned that one of the soldiers had violated God's command by taking spoils from Jericho. This violation of God's laws had led to the defeat. Instead of placing blame on the soldiers or giving in to despair, Joshua responded with resolve. He led the army to confront the issue head-on. A harsh but necessary punishment was meted out, and the violation was addressed. After this, the army was restored, and their confidence was rebuilt. Joshua showed that in times of failure, it is not enough to blame others or give up. The true leader must take responsibility, seek the truth, and restore order. This episode reveals a crucial aspect of Joshua's leadership, his unwavering commitment to maintaining the unity and discipline of the army. Joshua understood that in war, failure was inevitable, but how one responds to failure defines the outcome. Israel's defeat at Ai was not the end. It was a lesson in accountability and discipline. Joshua's handling of this failure not only restored the morale of his troops, but also reinforced the importance of trust in God and following his commands. Joshua's leadership was also marked by his ability to unify a people who were diverse and sometimes divided. The trials they faced in their military campaigns were not just external, but also internal. He had to continually remind his people of their shared purpose, of the promises made by God, and of the strength that came from working together as one. Every victory Israel achieved was not only a result of military might, but also of a collective spirit rooted in faith and unity. Joshua's journey, both as a military leader and a spiritual guide, teaches us that true strength does not come from physical prowess alone, but from the unity of purpose and the strength of faith. Whether in the face of overwhelming odds or internal conflicts, the lesson of Joshua's leadership is clear. Victory is possible when we remain united, faithful, and focused on the greater purpose. His story is a powerful reminder that true leaders are not only defined by their ability to win battles, but by their capacity to inspire and unify others, even in the most challenging times. In the end, Joshua's life and leadership show us that the greatest victories are not won by might or power, but by faith, unity, and the ability to overcome obstacles, both external and internal. His legacy endures as a beacon of hope and a model for all who strive to lead with wisdom, strength, and unwavering belief in the face of trials. final conquest, and the legacy of faith. As Joshua led the Israelites through successive victories, he never wavered in his faith or his commitment to God's instructions. By the end of his life, he had fulfilled the mission of leading Israel into the Promised Land. His final address to the nation was a poignant reminder of the choices that lay ahead. He urged them, "Choose this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." This declaration encapsulates Joshua's legacy, a life lived in faithful service and unwavering conviction. His words challenge us to reflect on our own lives and the commitments we make. His leadership teaches us that faith, when coupled with unity, can overcome even the most insurmountable odds. The story of Joshua is more than a tale of territorial conquests. It is a profound lesson in steadfast faith and the power of unity. In the most challenging moments, when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, Joshua relied not only on military might or strategic brilliance, but also on his unshakable faith in God and his ability to unite his people toward a common purpose. His victories were not strokes of luck or mere happenstance. They were the culmination of enduring faith, unity, and relentless perseverance. More importantly, Joshua's story leaves us with a powerful message about how we can face our own challenges. Like the Israelites, we often encounter obstacles that test our resolve, whether external temptations or internal struggles with doubt and fear. Yet, just as Joshua did, we can overcome anything if we hold fast to our faith and harness the strength that comes from unity. One of Joshua's greatest lessons is the enduring importance of perseverance in achieving goals while staying grounded in faith and unity. Success in life, whether in career, family, or personal aspirations, requires more than individual excellence. It demands the collective strength of a unified group. True success arises from a shared commitment to a common purpose. As Joshua demonstrated, no matter how formidable the walls before us may seem, they will crumble when we approach them together, bolstered by faith and determination. At the heart of Joshua's leadership is the act of choosing. His declaration, "Choose this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," is more than a statement of religious conviction. It is a reminder of personal responsibility and the weight of our commitments. Life is not a series of trivial or easy decisions. Each choice we make shapes our future and influences those around us. Choosing to serve a higher purpose, to align our lives with enduring values rather than fleeting gains, equips us to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. Joshua was not just a skilled military leader. He was a visionary who lived with purpose and a higher ideal. He fought not only for land but also for the spiritual and moral foundation of his people. His victories were not merely measured in territories gained, but in the enduring strength and values he instilled in his nation. This legacy challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we merely striving for personal success, or are we also building a stronger, more united community around us? Joshua's story forces us to confront questions of our own faith. Faith is not an abstract or vague concept. It is a practical source of strength that enables us to overcome the seemingly impossible. It is the belief in goodness, in long-term goals, and in the higher values that guide our lives. Faith lights our way when the path ahead feels uncertain. But faith cannot thrive in isolation. It needs unity, the mutual trust, and support of a community. The people around us amplify our strength, helping us stand firm and resilient in the darkest times. Let us remember that every challenge, every hardship, is an opportunity to grow, learn, and improve. Failures are not the end, but stepping stones to success. Joshua fought not just with strength, but with wisdom, patience, and an unyielding belief in his ultimate mission. If we look to his life as a mirror for our own, we can see that no matter how daunting the path or how towering the obstacles, unwavering faith and unity will always lead to triumph. Joshua's journey inspires us to live lives of purpose, anchored in faith and propelled by determination. The power of unity, perseverance, and faith is immeasurable, not only in overcoming life's challenges, but also in achieving the extraordinary. May we take Joshua's story as a source of inspiration, to live our lives fully and fearlessly, united in purpose and guided by unwavering belief. In doing so, we can transform not only ourselves but also the world around us.